Greetings adventurers and welcome to the MicFlayers podcast. My name is Martin O'Dwyer and I'll be your host for today's video. And in today's video we're going to talk about one of the most important things that you need to get right as a DM, and that is your descriptive writing. Descriptive writing is their primary weapon in the battle to keep our players engaged and entertained while we're DMing. If you can really set the fantasy and the scene right for your players in their head, you can really get them to buy in, and you can really just bring a whole new level of immersion and depth to your game. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through my top 3 tips for improving your descriptive writing. Let's go. So number 1, and probably what I would say is a really good thing to do if you're just starting DMing, this is a really good tip, and it's find your style by reading and doing some research. There are millions of actual play series on YouTube or on Twitch that you can go to, and you can see DMs of various quality and fame, and see how they work, see what they do, see how they set a scene, see how they describe their world to their players and bring them in. There's some real obvious recommendations I'm going to give you for ones that I think do the job particularly well. Obviously Matt Mercer, phenomenal, incredible DM, incredibly good descriptions. He really can set a scene. In their first campaign, there's a scene where one of the characters' daughters comes along and they play a fiddle, and just him describing her playing the fiddle set that so perfectly in my mind that I was just blown away. There's also Brennan Lee Mulligan, who is the resident DM for Dimension 20. His style is a bit more yes and more improv based than Matt's. Well, it at least seems from the outside anyway. Obviously I can't see behind the screen when he's DMing, but he kind of goes with the flow a lot and rolls that in, and he brings his descriptions into that as well. Another one that I quite enjoy, Mark Humes from High Rollers, he's quite a good DM too. Iyengar, also a fantastic DM. Those would be some of the 4 or 5 ones that I would recommend having a look at. I really enjoy what I've seen from each of them, and there's a very high level of quality to any of the shows they do. And they do some really great descriptions. Now, the one I think it's probably most useful to do would be, or rather what I think it's most useful to do would be to watch clips from each of them. Like, find highlight clips. There's loads of highlight clips all over YouTube of various different live streams. God, you can't escape the Critical Role ones if you're on the D&D YouTube sphere. Have a look at the clips, see how those DMs run, see which person's style you like the best, and take notes. Go look through. Watch the scene 2-3 times. Pay attention to the language they use. Pay attention to how they set the scene. What elements they bring in. How they bring the characters into that scene. All of these things you can pick up just by watching, and then with a little practice, you can integrate that into your game. And even if it doesn't go the greatest the first time, or you think you're not matching up quite to the level of where you are, it's a great thing about DMing. It's a process of constant improvement. Once you start something and you start getting your reps in, you will continue to improve. The more descriptive writing you do, the better you will be at descriptive writing. So in terms of DMs, absolutely go check out some live play DMs. Like I said, Brennan Lee Mulligan, Matt Mercer, Iyengar, Mark Humes, all great, all really phenomenal DMs that I've really enjoyed watching. As well, other than researching other DMs, I would also really recommend reading authors that write in a style that you like. For example, I absolutely adore the likes of like your Patrick Rothfuss, your Brandon Sandersons, Brent Weeks. I'm about halfway through Wheel of Time as well, and Robert Jordan is a phenomenal author too, and each of them has very different styles. Terry Pratchett's another really great fantasy author. I could not recommend Terry Pratchett anymore. Actually, even now that I bring up, there's a specific scene from Reaper Man where death defeats the villain, and that particular spoiler, sorry, I may beep that one on the final video, but where death defeats a villain rather, and the description of Death swinging his scythe in that, it's about a paragraph long description of just the scythe's movement through the air, and it is perfect. It is so good. Tolkien, obviously, another really, really influential and important one. But what I would recommend is, if you don't already have a fantasy author whose style you really, really like, have a look through the big ones. Your Sandersons, your Rothfusses, your Brent Weeks, the big modern kind of giants in the fantasy space. Because I do think fantasy is a good starting point to look for when you're researching influences for writing. And when you find one, latch on and then read through, find what it is that you like about the style. Is it the particular words they use? Is it the way they vary sentence length? Is it how they describe how certain things feel? There's a very famous opening to the name The Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, where he describes a silence, and he describes it as a silence of 3 parts. And he goes into each of the parts of the silence. I think it's literally the first page of The Name of the Wind. And it is... I remember reading it the first time and it just caught me straight away, and I was like, whoa, this guy has great style. And he continues that throughout the book, and the second one as well. Is the second one? Yeah, the second one's out. It's the third one that we're still waiting on, unfortunately. But I'm sure it will come. But yes, I would recommend them. It's the same kind of process as I was saying for the DMs. Go find an author, DM, someone you like, whose style you like. Do a little bit of research on it, like just read through it and try and pick out the pieces that you like, and then try and decide why you like those pieces. And then when you find that reason why, hang on to that, because that's the thing you like. If you can write in that style, your natural passion for that kind of thing will come true. In terms of research as well, it also helps if you're trying to describe a process like the forging of a sword. If you have even the smallest idea of how the actual forging of a sword or the smithing of something works, put that in there. Give extra detail. If you have any real world expertise about anything that is likely to come up in a game, and you can improve your descriptions by putting that detail in. So just as a summary, read and research widely. Find a DM, an author who has a style that you really, really like, that really appeals to you. Analyze that style, find out what it is about that style that you really, really like, and that's what you need to bring into your own descriptions if you want to do that. And then once you have that done, it's just practice, just continuing to write that. Do 2-3 drafts sometimes, and that's where we're going to get into our second point. My number 2 tip for improving your descriptions as a DM: use appropriate language, both to the setting, the moment, and to your audience. If it's a tense moment, you'll want to use language to build up that tension. You maybe don't want to go into the long sentence length for that, for the long sentences. Short, tense sentences when you're trying to build up tension. For example, as well, in terms of using appropriate language, there's a rule my English teacher had in secondary school, and it's something I've stuck with since, because I thought it was really, really good. The words bad, sad, happy, and good are illegal. You're not allowed to use them. You cannot use those in your text. You can come up with a million different really good synonyms for those words, and you can find them online really easily. And once you start stretching yourself to not use those very, very simple words, you can still use simple words, but more evocative words. Words like, instead of sad, you can say melancholy or despair. Instead of good, you say brilliant, excellent, like fantastic. Instead of bad, you can kind of get what I mean. Like, don't, like, if you have the opportunity to use specific language, use evocative language, because that's what's going to bring out the most in your descriptions. It's what's going to set the scene the most for your player, and it's what's going to evoke the most emotional reaction from them. And that's really what we're trying to do here. We're trying to set a scene and get an emotional reaction. So if you're just using very, very simple language, unless that really works and it's a case of catering to your audience who are maybe younger, I would say, yeah, limit yourself. Do not use words like good, bad, sad, like good, bad, sad, wrong, like anything like that. Just try and go beyond the ordinary and delve deeper into your more evocative, another word for maybe like flowery language. It's just so important, really, to setting a scene and to getting the right reaction, because what you're trying to, as I said, what you're trying to do as a DM in your world is engender a reaction from your players to the story. You're trying to set them up for moments that they can role play off of, or role play with each other around. So, for example, let's say a player dies in a battle. Let's say a player dies in a battle, or a character dies during a battle. As a DM, if you're describing their death, you can go, the rogue emerges from the shadows, stabs you in the back, and as you feel the blade pierce your heart from the back, and as it withdraws, your life flashes before your eyes and you drop to the floor dead. Or you can say, you stand there secure and unaware as the assassin lurks within the shadows. He slips from his darkened hiding place, wielding a wickedly sharp blade. He soundlessly walks up behind you, places a hand on your shoulder in 1 second, and in the next drives the blade between your shoulder blades. You feel it pierce your heart, and the metallic sting pushing through the walls of muscle. And as it withdraws, you begin to feel the last vestiges of your life drain from you as you collapse to your knees on the floor. Evocative language. You fall to the ground and you're dead, or you feel the last vestiges of life leave your body as you collapse to the floor. They mean the same thing, it's just one is going to engender a much bigger reaction than the other. And that's what we're trying to do. So that would be my second tip for improving your descriptions. Use appropriate language and use evocative language. It's what you need to do to really bring the immersion and the investment to the scene for your players, and to really set it in their heads for them. The third and final tip for improving your descriptions as a DM is, it's really simple. Appeal to all senses. We have far more than what we can just see and hear, and so do your D&D players. If you're describing a new area, don't just talk about how it looks, what they can hear. Describe how it makes them feel. What can they smell? Like, if it's a market and they're going through a market, there's going to be stalls, there's going to be people selling all kinds of stuff. They're going to be shouting out to try and get people to come towards them. Some of the stalls might be selling food. You can visually describe how the food looks, and you can describe how it smells. You can tell your players how it makes you feel. You can describe how it makes their stomach grumble and their mouth water when they smell it. You can do the exact same with more dramatic or important stuff, like if someone is casting a spell, rather than just saying, oh, you weave the threads of magic together and clap your hands, and the lightning bolt shoots out of your hands towards the enemies. Well, if you're describing specifically something like a lightning bolt, for example, well, we can draw from nature. We know that this is actually a thing that Matt Mercer likes to say quite a lot, and I think I picked it up off him just by osmosis watching so much Critical Role. It's particularly with lightning stuff, he'll describe like a smell of burnt ozone when there's when a lightning bolt is cast. You can talk about the sound, like as they're drawing the spells and making the hand gestures to actually cast the spell. You can describe like elements of static, like leaping from fingertip to fingertip as the charge builds. You can describe how the air crackles with electricity, and you can bring all that in. Like, as both people and Dungeons and Dragons players, we tend to engage the world very visually, very much. We're visual creatures. It's why I'm on YouTube, and this isn't the podcast. But yeah, we're very visual creatures. So naturally, as a DM, when you go to describe a scene, you're probably going to go sight and sound first, but you should really try and bring in more of the sight, sound, smell, how it makes you feel, taste. Like if they're in a bakery, the smell of like fresh baked bread and how that makes them feel, and they can almost taste the pastries in the air. For other things like that, like the market is probably the best example, or anywhere, basically any kind of public space, you can usually at least appeal to three senses, if not just what they see and what they hear. You can also appeal to how it makes them feel, if they pick up and touch anything. It just makes it a far more evocative and kind of believable and engrossing description, and really helps to put your players in there. Like I remember one I think you might have heard on if you listened to our podcast before, I mentioned it before, but so like my players were in like a desert area, and they went into a town, and they went to a market in that town, and when they got into the town, I was describing the weather. It's a desert climate, it's extremely hot. Now what I could have just said to them was, You arrive at the market. It's a very, very hot day. The sun is high overhead. There's very little cloud coverage, and you can feel yourself sweating. No, look, I'm not saying that's a bad description in any way. That's actually, like, it's very much a direct. You can understand that very easily and very simply and very quickly. And particularly if the area you're heading to isn't a place you plan to feature, or isn't of any really great importance to the story, you can do stuff like that, and you can just be very succinct with it. But like, if it's a place that you want to really establish in your players' heads, if it's a place that you're going to visit often and you want them to have a good mental image of that, or if it's a place where something important is going to happen, or the place is important in itself, you might want to give a little more just to really, really set that scene. So how can we do that? We can do that basically by following the previous 2 tips in this video. We can use a diverse range of language and sentence length. We can use a particular style to actually really, really engender the response we want. So the whole goal of like this scene of the scene that we're trying to set here is we're trying to establish the market for the players and establish how hot it is and how that makes them feel. So instead of saying you arrive at the market, the sun is high overhead, there's very little cloud cover leaving you exposed to the elements, you can feel yourself sweating as you stand there. Instead of saying that, what you can say is that you arrive to the market on a blisteringly hot day. There isn't a single cloud overhead to shield you from the powerful rays of the sun as they beat down on you overhead. You can feel the dryness in the air as you breathe it in, sucking the moisture from your mouth. You can feel as you stand there under the intense gaze of the sun's fiery eye, sweat beginning to roll down between your neck and your armour. You can feel it go down your back. You can feel the cloying, stiflingness of your helmet on you in this weather. I think you just kind of, it's all to do with using the appropriate language, using varied language, using evocative language, and then just adding detail. It's just, if you watch the making unique magic items video I made a couple of weeks ago, it's a very, very similar kind of process. It's knowing where to add in the detail, what details to focus on to evoke the right response, and what language to use to further shore that up. So the goal of that was to make the player feel hot. So what did we do? We told them what the weather was like. The sun is beating down. We gave that emphasis 2 to 3 times. Repetition is a really, really good way to emphasize something. I said when they arrived that there wasn't a shred of cloud in the sky, which to give them cover from the sun's rays, which were beating down on top of them. And then I described it as a fiery eye, its gaze set upon them. That's 3 times you've emphasized the heat of the sun and also in almost like an attacking or a antagonistic role, and that's how we can really, really set that. Damn, it's hot. And then so that's generally what it's like. You describe what it looks, then I went on to describe how it's so dry, there's very little moisture in the air, like you can feel your mouth drying up because of that. That's feeling, that's sensation. If you wanted to go into the smell, you could start talking about it. You can smell the dryness and the of, like, maybe it's like a like clay tile kind of thing, and you can smell like the cracked dryness of the clay tile road in the heat. There's a bunch of things you can go into just about environmental features and how your players respond to them, and going beyond just sight and sound, going to sight, sound, taste, touch, smell. That's where you can really, really, really set a scene powerfully for your players. And I think that's really where you can get the really good detail that will set your descriptions apart from just your generic fantasy descriptions. It's when you really dig in and when you use the right words to draw out the right reaction. So folks, in summary, my top 3 tips for improving your descriptions as a DM would be: 1, read and do your research. And I know do your research has become a bit of a meme in recent years, but I mean, find authors you like, find DMs that you like, look at their work and decide exactly what it is about their work that you like, and bring that into your own game. Number 2, make sure you use appropriate language for your audience, the moment, and the setting. Do not use extremely plain language like good, bad, sad, happy. Draw that out. like change that into more complex, more evocative language that will really set the scene for your players. And finally, when you're describing a scene, try to avoid your natural tendency to just focus on sight and sound. Try to appeal to all of the senses instead of just one or two. The more of them you can hit in a single description effectively, the more real the scene is for your player. And that's it, folks. Those are my top 3 tips for improving your descriptions as a DM. If you have any comments or queries or questions below, please do go ahead and leave a comment below. You can also hit us up on Twitter at the MicFlayers pod on Twitter. Or rather at MicFlayers pod on Twitter. You can also find me on Twitter at So Sorry It's Over if you fancy following me there. And we'll have links to all those in the description as well. And yeah, if you have any other videos or any other topics you'd like me to talk about, I know lately I've been doing a lot of DM advice stuff. If there's anything you guys would like to see from me, I'd be happy to show you some of my own homebrew stuff that I've worked on and kind of run through that. But yeah, let me know what you'd like to see. Thanks very much for watching the video anyway, and yeah, if you want, you can hit like and subscribe. It would be a really great help to the channel and to myself and Connor. And otherwise, we also do a long form podcast that has a number of episodes out, which you can find on our channel as well, called the MicFlayers podcast, where we talk different topics weekly, myself and my co-host Connor. Alright folks, thank you again so much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and thank you very much. Bye bye.